Pleased to be joined by my partner in crime, none other than Cheryl Pounder. Earlier today during Free Agent Frenzy, the men went over their projected Canadian Olympic lineup. So I think it's our turn to take a crack at what the projected Canadian women's Olympic roster will be for Milano Cortina 2026. So let's start with the forwards. And as you take a look, there's not too many changes than the 2025 Women's Worlds roster. Most notable there, though, you'll see Hannah Miller. Again, it's pending approval from Hockey Canada and the IHF that she'll be eligible to play. And if that approval can happen, well, I think, Cheryl, you and I agree, we would love to see her wearing the maple leaf at the Olympic Games. So that's a notable change there. Very much want to bolster that secondary scoring, get the most out of Sarah Fillet. We saw what Watts could do at the most recent World Championship. She was an excellent addition. And as we kind of lean out towards that fourth line, we did opt to keep Natalie Spooner in this lineup group moving into the Olympics. So touching on a few of these items here, what are your thoughts on how we've laid out this forward group?
Well, and it's difficult, right, Kenz, when we're looking through all of the available players in the PWHL and evaluation, you're starting to look at the puzzle pieces as well and the handedness perhaps, and whether you're on the wing or you're on the flank, whether you're an offensive defender, whether you're a stay-at-home. So all of these pieces factor into a short-term tournament, and certainly chemistry does as well, which is why we have lined that top line, Jen Gardner, Poulin, and Stacey, right? We've seen the chemistry that they've had. We saw at the most recent World Championship in Czechia Budovice what Jen Gardner was able to do. Not only does she have heavy IQ, but she gets to pockets on the ice. She can distribute the puck, so I really like her on this Olympic roster. Laura Stacey, you know that she can always align with Emily Clark and Blair Turnbull. You know that Troy Ryan will always go to that if he thinks he needs to rejig his lineup, but I do like her on the right flank alongside Poulin, more of a linear player that can go get that puck, a nice healthy one-timer as well. As we go down the roster into that second line, I've got Fillier in the middle here, and the reason being, I think down the middle, if she can be in that 2C, not only is she a right-hander that can be effective in the dot, but I also think that she's a player that can work well down and low in her own zone. She can change her own speed, and if she's working with the likes of someone like Miller as well as Watts, this is a group that can create. Miller can also go into the dot as well as a left-handed center to be able to win some faceoffs as well. So you can also switch those two up depending on how it's working. But no question about it, Miller can shoot from distance. She can put the puck in the net. And then you've got Watts and Fillier, more of creative players that will look to dance in the offensive zone and really open up room. So Miller, a natural goal scorer, might be a nice addition there. We go down to that third line. We've got Clark, Turnbull, and Jenner. We've seen this look. Jenner, a versatile piece. Listen, she's a right shot. She's been on this team for over a decade. So if you need to elevate her, guess what? She can also play alongside Poulin. So I think that this is really important to know that there's versatility within the lineup, which also brings me down to that fourth line where you've got Nurse and you've got Emma Malte and Danielle Serdachny. And these three, listen, there is going to be some familiarity with Nurse and Malte, with the Scepters, but Nurse can also elevate, right? If you want to move Fillier to the flank and you don't feel like Miller's working out, now all of a sudden you can elevate Nurse to that two-hole. So I think there's a lot of different looks in play right here. Serdachny not coming off the year that she would have liked in the PWHL, but she's got speed. She got the overtime winner in Utica at the World Championship. So I do think that this is an athlete that can really, have an impact on the international stage. And Natalie Spooner, you got to leave her in the mix. I mean, not only is she a player that keeps things light, she was the MVP from a season ago with the Scepters, coming off that huge injury, but she is a massive player who, if you need something at the right time, she can be a spark. You can elevate her into a top six. She's going to drive the middle of the ice. She's going to get to the paint, and on the power play, she's one of those players that operates best when she's around the paint. So she'll be looking behind her, looking where the goalie is, trying to get the tap in and the rebound. So I could see her on a power play as well.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like that no-brainer to keep Gardner, Poulin, and Stacey together, because not only do you want to get that secondary scoring, let's say, by Gardner, but also who can make Poulin the best? And she's coming off 12 points at the most recent World Championship, the most since 2013, so that seems like a duo you don't want to mess with. And also, let's not forget, this is a 23-player roster at the Olympics as opposed to the increased roster from the World Championships, so there are some names we'll need to cut coming into this, so this is our 23-player roster. Let's now head over to the defense, because in my opinion, this is the most dynamic blue lines we've seen Team Canada have in years. And let's start with looking at Bella Shelton and Renata Fast, who are now teammates with the Toronto Scepters. So maybe Troy Ryan will opt to put them together, see what can happen here, if they can continue to build off of their international stage experience to the Scepters, and eventually how that can translate to the Olympic Games. Of course, Thompson will remain with Ambrose. We've seen how consistent they've been. And then there's that 3, 4, 5 player rotation where you wonder and you scratch your head, okay, who's going to be the best fit here? Jocelyn Larocque coming off playing one of her best seasons, showing that age is just a number. Sophie Jakes is dynamic in that way. And we've opted to put 18-year-old Chloe Primerano on this roster. Cheryl, kind of walk me through again these options and why they are best fit for Canada's blue line.
And again, it's so difficult because we were looking at Ashton Bell as well, and the year that she's had, right, with the Ottawa Charge and the playoff that she had, just that one-on-one ability to shut down. And so it all depends what you want. And so when I look at that, sort of that top pairing, and you go to Shelton and Fast, I say this is kind of a no-brainer, right? You've got someone like Shelton. She's a left-handed defender, so not only can she shut down the cycle, she plays hard in the middle of the ice, but calculated risks. And this is what you want from a top pairing D. But she's also playing alongside Renata Fast, Defender of the Year in the PWHL this past season. And there's a reason for it, right? I mean, she lives up to her last name. She's one of the fastest players in the game. She's got a tenacious edge, gets the elbows up sometimes when she's closing, but she transports the puck as well. So this is a pairing that either can be shut down, but they can also provide some offense. So when I look at them, I think that's just a dynamic duo on the blue line that will have a ton of responsibility. When I go to the second pair, and you mentioned it with Thompson, Thompson's one of those players who loves to activate north, but Erin Ambrose will stay back, right? She knows how to get pucks through from the blue line, and depending on who is on your power play, she is one that can operate from that position, right? Because she really has eyes as deceptors, and what I mean by that is she is able to look off players to open up seams, and it's not a blast from the point, but it finds its way through. So now you've got someone sort of staying at home, but you've got Claire Thompson activating. So I do like those two together, and then you get to Larocque, as you mentioned, and this is your bona fide shutdown defender. So when you look at this blue line and you say, okay, I need someone to prevent the puck from going in the net of the Canadians, you're going to say, okay, there is Larocque. If you have a defensive zone face-off in a close game, this is the athlete that you're looking to put out there. But I've also aligned her with the likes of a Jakes or a Primerano, and I think this is kind of this 6-7 is sort of up in the air for me. I mean, or at least I would think for Troy Ryan. And you see, Sophie Jakes has just got a bomb from the point. And I think that she's one of those players who has a first pass that can pass up the option, so can get above it and find ways to get going north because it's such a heavy pass. And so if you can get the exit, guess what? This forward group can create. So I really like Jakes back there. I would really like to see her as an option as a power play quarterback, just because she's got that shot. So it'll be interesting how she is deployed if she is on this team. Of course, that hasn't been chosen yet. And then there's Primerano coming in as a young athlete. They did take her to the World Championship, so I would expect you don't just bring in a young defender. Listen, when I came in, they brought me in, they took me out, right? But I think they learned from that. You want to bring your young athletes in, you want to give them opportunity, and you also want to sort of let them percolate. And someone alongside, like a Primerano, alongside a Larocque could certainly be, a nice pairing. But for Primerano, if she's playing well, she's going to get in, right? We've seen her and how she can dance with the puck, how she can open up lanes. It's just a matter of her having that confidence to play her game on the biggest stage.
Now let's move over to goaltending, because between you and I, showing turnover here in this position. Of course, you can select 3. So we went with, of course, ARD, René Desbiens, Emirates Mashmeyer, and then Eve Gascon. Of course, these were the 3 goaltenders Canada took in the most recent World Championship. There was question around injuries as well in that department. Desbiens was fine. And we've also seen Gascon. Now, she hasn't played a game yet on the international stage, Cheryl. Do you think Gina Kingsbury or Troy Ryan would consider putting in Gascon at all during these Olympic Games? Look, we saw John Robleski, the United States, switch between McNaughton as well as, I should say, Gwyneth Phillips in one of the games against Switzerland, Game 4 preliminary game. Do you think Canada could maybe do that with Gascon in this upcoming Olympics?
Well, I would like to see it done, but, that hasn't been tradition with this team, right? It's been that 1-2, if that's what they are, if it's going to be ARD, who's sort of your first goaltender, and then Emirates Mashmeyer, coming off of injury, but Emirates Mashmeyer sort of was having a great year as well. And then you've got Eve Gascon, and depending on the scouting that happens in the NCAA at UMD, there's a lot to consider here, but I would certainly like to see her get an opportunity here. I mean, she's athletic, she's technical, she's all of those things, and I've watched her play from a very young age, and this woman is the real deal. So I would like to see her get a sniff, but you know, with the way it has gone in the past, they tend to stick with their top guns, and so that'll be something that'll be interesting. Another thing, Kenzie, that's interesting to me is, you know, we toyed with other players as part of this group, and it wasn't that we didn't think that they were good enough to crack it. It's more the time, depending on when this PWHL season starts, whether or not they can get the body of work in to be able to showcase themselves enough to Gina Kingsbury and Troy Ryan, right? Because last year, the league did not start until early December. So if you're someone coming out of the NCAA, sort of you're on the outside looking in, are you going to get enough games to sort of change the opinion? Now, I think this current group, these are the ones you'd be working with right now, the Ashton Bells of the world that have been playing, so they would still have an opportunity to fight for these spots within. But I think that's going to be, you know, the real pressing thing for me right now is, even if a player's coming out of college and they look fantastic, are they going to have the opportunity, whether by camp or whether in the PWHL, to showcase them enough to say, hey, you know what, I want a spot on this roster, take this player out, insert me, even though I don't have the same experience?
Look, this is the hardest roster to crack in the upcoming hockey year. We'll see how it all unfolds. We'll leave it in the hands of Gina Kingsbury and their staff to select who will best represent Canada. Their tournament opens at the Milano Cortina 2026 Olympic Games on February 5th. They'll open their preliminary game against Finland.